Hey everyone, welcome to the Tech and Real Estate live stream. Today we're going to talk about code violation leads. And we have Pablo Delgado, who is an expert in using data and technology for unique solutions. So, super excited about this topic. Hey Pablo, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah.
Perfect. Before we get into your background, I'm going to share my screen here as folks trickle in on what's going on in my world. So, what I've been currently working on this week, today, super excited. We're going to launch our live series for alternative leads. This has been a question I've gotten throughout the years, like how do I do web scraping, skip tracing, data aggregation? And to be honest, I worked a full-time job for a long time, so I didn't have the bandwidth. But now with the team as well, we can actually deliver this type of course where you can ask questions live. As well, I do have some new content that I put out that kind of leads into this mini series. One being how to get tired landlords, specifically those that have active vacancy. So not 90 days later when UPS or USPS tells you that the property is vacant, but actually in this moment. Next week, I'll do a web scraping session where I'll show you how to use web scraping to be able to get pre-foreclosures as well. The whole theme of these leads is going to trickle into November, where we have a big announcement of what we'll be doing and how it all correlates. Personally, in my world, on Saturday, I'm planning to go pumpkin picking, which I'm very excited about with my two nephews that are under the age of 5. And I get this question often. Ariel, now I'm living in Florida for 4 years. Like, what do you miss about New Jersey? Not that much, to be honest. But one thing that I really miss, and it's always this time of year, is how good like the farms are in New Jersey, and specifically for like October, doing pumpkin picking, apple picking, and this one place called Battle View Orchards. It's in Freehold. It's been around since 1908. My favorite thing that I would always have is their apple pie. Like hands down, one of the best I've ever had. Some people will claim that the donuts are number one, which that's okay if that's your preference. Uh, Usually they have like a 30-minute to 1 hour wait just to get their cider donuts. So it's a pretty big deal. But with that, we are here for the main event, which is having Pablo Delgado speak more on code violation data. And I'd love for you guys to put in the comments where you're tuning in from, as well any questions that you may have. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
I'll do a screen share on my end. Let's see if it comes up.
There we go.
Yeah. So,
yeah, Pablo, just to get started, would love to hear a little bit more about your background and your role in real estate.
sure. Yeah. So I've started probably as many of you trying to identify some properties that I could invest in. I used to live in Houston, Texas. Now I live in London. So have now I've kind of gotten rid of some of my portfolio just because it became very challenging to remote manage it. So I still have an Airbnb in Houston, but I had two, and one of them just became very it gave us a lot of headaches. So I ended up just selling the house, right? But now most of my time really spent in trying to grow our data business, LSP data. And with that, there's a few products under our portfolio. And today I'm going to talk to you a bit about just how we're leveraging code violations to provide our users more leads and just kind of yeah, so that's kind of what's going on with me at the moment. We're doing other projects around lead generation for other contractors like roofers, solar panels, windows, etc. So a lot of the data that we have can be used for different use cases, and I love sitting and having these conversations because I get a lot of different ideas from different folks. So I think in our last live, I mentioned that you learn quite a bit just by talking to people, especially when it comes to business owners, which is quite nice. So unlimited use cases, right? Yeah. So now, let's jump into what are code violations. So a lot of people, even myself included, I came across this type of leads or this type of data because a few years ago, you could go to your local city and request a list of sort of water shut off list, as I used to call them, right? And now it's become very difficult to get a hold of those, right? And over time, I realized that you know I could request code violations directly from the city, which you could still do, right? And you have to be very specific in the time frame that you're looking for, what kind of code violations you're looking for, right? At least I know for Houston, I can speak about this. Uh, Give you the last 6 months, the last year worth, and but it also it gives you a lot of information as well. So to step back a little bit, I think this is what works for most cities. So in Houston, let's say if you have most people can report code violations, right? So if you're not taking care of your lawn, or maybe that house across from you is boarded up, maybe now it's attracting vagrants or other folks, maybe specific neighborhoods, there's a lot of drug dealing, etc. All that gets reported, right? It could be a pothole, it could be lights not working, whatever the case may be. But within neighborhoods, from experience, we realize that a lot of folks are reporting things that happen throughout their neighborhood, whether it's noise complaint, etc. So typically, you can report it via email or via an app. Most cities, major cities, have contract with tech vendors, so they have their own application, right? And I think from what we're seeing across the US, they're sticking to that sort of 311. So I guess code violation 311 service request is sort of the same kind of it all ends up in the same place. But the point of this is that, as you can see, it's a sort of a mutual benefit for the city and those tech providers, right? Because the city makes money off of these violations, right? So first, I can report, say, my neighbor is not taking care of their grass, right? It's impacting the quality, or at least from the optics perspective, the neighborhood, right? So people don't want their neighborhoods to sort of decline. And obviously, like a lot of us, right, we want those properties to appreciate over time. And obviously people, you go out of the way to ensure that the neighborhoods are kept clean, especially if you live in like HOA communities. But in general, a quick example here is, if you don't mow your grass, right, the city will come and mow it for you, but then they'll send you a bill after that, right? And depending on the type of complaint that you may have, right, obviously the fine increases. So what happens typically? I report an issue. This gets, creates a ticket on their end. They send an inspector to come, and depends on what the issue is, right? They can issue a fine, or like I said, they can take action and mow the lawn for you, etc. But in general, this predates the code violation list that you can request from the city. So we're getting ahead of the point where the actual city, adds it to the code violation list. So even if you were to request the last 90 days worth of code violations, a lot of this 311 data is not going to be there, right? Because there's a chance that it never makes it there, or just depends on the workload of all the city workers, right? Because if you're dealing with big cities like Houston, Miami, Dallas, obviously they probably have a long queue of things to go over, right? But in general, that's kind of a quick overview of the code violations.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for breaking this down, also sharing your screen here. So taking a step back, if you're a newbie investor and you're like first understanding, code violations on versus off market leads, like who does this help? Is this in the on market bucket, the off market bucket? And what are the types of personas for investors that would go after properties with code violations?
So I would say for this specific ones, it's mainly off market properties, right? So the reason for that is, like you mentioned earlier, with the USPS and a few other ones, right? Obviously, most people want to, whatever commercial tools you use, a lot of people select, vacant properties and then target those from the off-market perspective, right? What I found out though, from the quote unquote on market side of the house, you could use a lot of, we created visualizations on this just to give us sort of the quality of the neighborhoods. I know this is kind of a little bit outside the scope of your question, but the way we could use it is we can give the real estate agent or someone else that works with customers that are looking for on market properties, we can say, hey, this is the type of complaints that happen around this neighborhood. So maybe they can verbalize that to the future homeowner, which may or may not, use that extra layer of information to say, okay, you know what, this is not a great neighborhood because there's a lot of nuisances, there's a lot of junk vehicles, etc. So that, especially, if you don't live, if you're a remote investor, right, that gives you a really good clear picture on sort of like boots on the ground of how does the neighborhood look like. But yeah, just step back. Yeah, I think this type of information really benefits sort of those off-market folks. Again, on-market MLS listings tends to be a bit pricey, so a lot of people look for alternative ways to find a good deal.
Excellent. And I think what's really key here as well, as you mentioned, is the real time view, right? It's not like we're seeing crime data from 2021 plotted on a map. This is like literally violations that have occurred recently. And also, you're not waiting until there's already some sort of fine and the aggregation of all that data has occurred. This is like before that. So, especially for investors who are working by themselves or in very small teams with low marketing budgets, it's really critical to look at leading indicators of distress rather than lagging indicators.
Okay, yeah. And the way we're kind of leveraging this, right? I mentioned this virtual drive for dollars, but in reality, it's a combination of different things, right? And this is sort of one of our products that includes a lot of those code violation information, right? So again, depending on the city, you're going to get thousands of potential code violations, and a lot of them obviously they have nothing to do with the actual property in question, right? So like I mentioned, you get things like potholes, or traffic lights are down, etc., or maybe the parks, right? So that has nothing to do with real estate. So what we're doing with virtual drive for dollars is that we're sort of parsing through a lot of, or I should say, filtering a lot of those and just focusing on things that are relevant to the real estate investor, right? So in this instance, a lot of times the complaints or descriptions are very detailed. So we're looking for specific type of keywords when we can for for those properties, right? And it makes it a lot easier for you to identify those potential opportunities, right? So think of it the exact same example as you driving through your neighborhoods and just kind of visually looking at properties and saying, hey, you know what, that looks like it's an abandoned property, or hey, no one's picked up the mail in a few weeks, etc., right? So a lot of this instances, you get ahead of even the USPS Postal Service sort of list. And two, you also get to know the intimate sort of side of how a landlord may be running their properties from the tenant's point of view. So they may complain about things like mold, the roof is caving in, a lot of things that you wouldn't I say it's intimate information, right? So by the time, if you determine a good opportunity, when you get on the phone with that potential seller, right, it helps you not only with the ARV, right, because you understand the type of repairs that are needed, but I think it gives you a little bit more of that negotiation power, right, because you have a clear picture on how the property looks like. And yeah, if you like at this point, Ariel, I can jump into the platform and kind of give a quick demo, or if there's any questions that I may answer.
Sure. Actually, before we get into a quick demo, visually, would you be able to pull up like one of those, I think, posts you made on Instagram where it's what a property looks like on Google Maps versus like using the violation data?
Sure. Yeah. So recently, oh, I can't. Oh, yeah, I think I can. Just real quick. My screen sharing, unless it requires me. No. And here we go. So, so this is how uh, I can't open it, but I think you get a pretty decent idea here. So yeah. So for example, top view would be Google Street View, which a lot of times tends to be quite outdated, right? So we'll give you a more real-time view of how the property may look like. Again, because a lot of this, sometimes when people report those complaints, they take a picture, right? So we're also processing a lot of the pictures to ensure that we're pulling relevant information as well, and how that property looks like today. Now we're trying to do this nationwide, but for now I would say it's in about 60% of the cities that we offer. But to my knowledge, there's no service that kind of does this. And again, this is one of the favorite features for our customers, because it gives you a clear picture of what is the situation that's happening, right? So that's what we're calling it, virtual drive for dollars.
Yeah, like the one you just hovered over, June 10th, on the middle.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy because, like, you say you hire a virtual assistant to go through Google Maps regularly for you. It's like they're going to get that capture up top from 2022. Like, that's, we're almost in 2025 here, very outdated. Yet by utilizing data more smartly, being able to parse these photos, you're able to get this real-time view, which is awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why I'm very confident to call it virtual drive for dollars, as opposed to let's look at Google Street View. And yeah, so
Awesome. I'd love to dive into the product now.
okay, very good. So we'll start with Houston, unless anyone has specific cities that we want to look at. But just to give you a quick kind of overview of how a user would use this platform, right? Depending on our cities, we also like to add additional sort of filters, such as tax delinquent and whatnot, right? So in this instance, let's say we're just for the sake of time and everything, let's just look at properties that have a tax delinquent and in which we have an image associated. It's like I said, not all properties have an image associated. And what we're doing, again, you get the description of the complaint, right? And the complaint type, which again, a lot of times we focus based on our experience, like nuisance of property tends to be one that's very relevant. And if I scroll to the right, also we have different property types. So all the information to the right? So we're not only, kind of giving you the quote unquote code violation or feature code violation, but we're also tying that to the appraisal, the parcel information, right? So if you're interested in doing, infill lots, vacant lots, single family properties, multifamily, commercial, etc., we can also filter for that, right? So if we scroll down just visually, right, the ones that say image not available tend to be those that the picture that was taken is irrelevant to the property. So we're doing a little bit of LLM to clean some of those. But if we scroll down, let's say this one is a house, right? Again, sometimes you may not see a lot, but if we go to the description, it says squatter continues to move in. So this is a squatter problem, right? And there is a tax delinquency on that property. If we keep scrolling down, right?
That one, sorry, I'm just reading the description of that one. It's like, and police think she's carrying a gun.
Yes, that's right. So again, yeah, just beware. Let's look at this one, right? Even though this was reported as a junk motor vehicle, we can see that the vacant, the property is actually vacant, right? If we click on it, it actually gives us a visual of how the property looks like, right? So that's a good example. This one is the vacant house has become dump site, etc. It looks like this one is also a problem. There's tax delinquencies, and at times when we have enough information, we can also tell if there is a eviction that took place as well. So again, depending on the city, depending on the information available, this is the level of information that we can get. Again, you can also sort by the type of property that you're interested in, or search for specific keywords, right? So in this instance, we just made it easier because we're filtering tax delinquency. But if you wanted to look for properties that were just vacant, just search for vacant, and you will get a lot of those more descriptive, right? So like of what's the situation in that property. So again, we're kind of, like I said, some of them we're basically filtering based on the description given when we can. Otherwise, we select relevant complaint types, because sometimes there's no description given, right? Or sometimes because there's a junk motor vehicle, you may not think that that's related to the property, but it is at times, right? And again, the beauty of this is um, it's we're trying to get it as real time as possible, but we do update the platform twice a day because they're all, it is a big database. And for example, for Houston, there's about 25,000 entries. Depending on how big your city is, that may range. Miles may vary. But again, here, how our customers typically use it is that they'll focus on specific zip codes or specific neighborhoods, right? And then from there, you may say, you know what, I only want to look at the last 7 days worth of complaints. That way you're getting the most up-to-date information, right? And let's say, just for the sake of it, let's look for tax delinquent. Let's say we do boarded, as in like the property's boarded. That reduces it to 8, right? Of boarded properties that have a tax delinquency, right? If there's a more specific data, like for example, if you're planning to skip trace this, right? You could do, let's pull up individuals. So that way we're only getting, maybe we're not getting LLCs or properties that are difficult to skip trace, right? So if this is what fits our criteria based on also the asset class, right? It's as simple as just exporting this to either Excel or as a CSV. I don't think I can. I don't know if I'll be able to share the spreadsheet here, but
I'm assuming a similar tabular view to what you have right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just as easy as uploading it to your favorite skip tracing platform, and yeah, it just makes it very easy to. Sorry, I think I stopped my screen, but I wanted to just quickly.
One quick question, Pablo. Are you able to see comments right now?
No.
Okay. We either have a very shy crowd today or Restream once again is not showing me comments. Yeah, but continue.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, so this is how the output of that export would look like. And again, you get all the relevant information, just to make it easier for you to skip trace it, right? Or if you want to upload this to your favorite platforms for to get more analysis on the property itself, which I know Ariel and her staff are very good at this. Yeah, you can do that as well. But I think we make it very easy for anyone to just skip trace it and upload it to your favorite platform. So I think from our point of view, as long as you're getting good leads and whatnot, then that's all we care. I guess people are shy today.
No worries. Yeah, Pablo, awesome walkthrough here. And with how you're able to speak to this, how you've aggregated the data, I mean, you must be someone who's been in real estate and in data for so long. Is this true? And if not, how did you kind of find yourself?
Not necessarily. I started around 2020, but I do have a bit of, I guess you can call it open source sort of kind of background. I have a cybersecurity background. So when I'm looking for data, I know I'm going to find it. So it's more of like the use cases that I'm used to working with changed over time to more real estate, right? And since I knew that basically all the big companies, whether you're talking about ListSource, Atom Data, etc., a lot of times they're getting this data directly from the county. So they're doing nothing different than what we're doing, right? So that's why I'm pretty sort of open about, where the data comes from, etc., because we're not doing anything differently. At times, I can say that we're a little bit better, but for the most part, until we get to their size, yeah, no promises.
So you get the monster size, and then you're charging like $20K a month. Yeah. Yeah, those softwares aren't cheap. So for yourself, when you were first learning about code violations and stuff, was it like certain customers that you worked with where it was their problem? You're like, let me see if I could solve it with data, or how did you start to?
Very selfishly, because I was doing the same thing. I think as 99% of the people do. So when they're going to the platforms, selecting absentee owners and trying to target many of them, right, and understanding they have limited budget, I realized that I needed to get more into a niche area. And so yeah, I was doing it more from a selfish point of view of I want to kind of stand out from the competition, right? And after I would say I probably got 3 deals out of this um, before I just shifted to just data, right? So um, yeah, again, I have different experiences, not some great, not great with managing properties. So I realized, you know what, I think this makes a lot more sense as I'm helping other investors. So, but yeah, at that point I realized, okay, code violations are lead us somewhere and kind of get us ahead of the USPS code violation vacancies and other areas as well.
Excellent. And that's something I want to draw on, right? So, one, this could be super useful if you're someone who's looking at off market leads to be able to get ahead of competition in your space. But second, if you're someone who's more just like technical and you're trying to learn how to get into the real estate space with technical solutions, sometimes it just starts with solving problems on your own. Like, I probably would have never fell into the real estate tech space until I was trying to analyze my own deals, and every like guru that came up said, open up a spreadsheet. I was like, what? This is not 1990. Like, we've moved off of spreadsheets to all the companies that I work with. Like, we automate all of that. So why is it so archaic in real estate? Um, so yeah, just challenge folks. Like, if you want to get into the space, you want to do prop tech, try to do some of it on your own or work with someone who has a lot of experience and you could solve real pain points, which can really help.
Yep, yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's the only way, right? If you want to create a viable business, especially in this space, I mean, um, yeah, you have to one also stand out and make sure that this is long-term commitment. But yeah, talk to people. Yeah, hear their pain points.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually pulled some of this data that cause you graciously sent me some of this information. So I'm going to share my screen here. Replace my screen. I always have 101 windows up.
Mhm.
But yeah, mini preview. Can you see my screen yet or not? Not yet.
Not yet.
Let's see. Stop sharing and share here.
There we go.
Yeah, so as a mini preview for 4.0, BYOL will be a thing where you could bring your own list. So I did load in the properties that you sent over. And it would think for Houston, I like filtered down to a smaller list of properties that I cared about. And then I ran them through here so I could see all of the free and clear properties of what could be good for seller financing. So like this deal in particular, I saw that came from your list that actually has pretty good cash on cash return. Owner fully owns their property, 3 years, 10 months. So could potentially be a deal. This was for Greenville, North Carolina, actually. Um, so yeah, I think it's pretty awesome how you can gather the data and then ultimately you can use like other tools like coffee closers to be able to analyze it as well.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, right? What your product kind of helps, right? It saves people tons of time and just kind of if you know this, especially if there's tax delinquencies or any other issues, and being able to analyze it. And if you're the first person that's looking at this, right? Obviously, once you get on the phone, you probably have higher chances of closing that deal, right? And obviously, depending on how good your sales closing skills are as well.
Yeah, exactly. Less competition. So you did, I do want to touch upon like what cities you do offer this service for.
Sure.
And yeah, that'd be great.
Alrighty. So I'll touch on the sort of what cities we're covering as well as the pricing, and we have a bit of surprise for the viewers. So for now, let me know if you can see it now.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so we're covering about 50 plus cities and growing. I would say I think it's 55 now, but basically you have two types of subscription. So for the question earlier, we are covering about a few cities in Florida, and I think we have two more that we need to update here. But yeah, if you sign up for the entire Florida state, you get access to those cities, and basically you can access them from here. So as you can see, Pensacola, Clearwater, Miami-Dade, Orlando, and again, growing. And typically we like to, we like to get that feedback. So if you do become a customer and there's cities that you want us to add to the platform, we can definitely do that, depending on how big the city is and whatnot. Or we can also create custom dashboards for you specifically if that is an interest. But again, about 55 cities nationwide, and growing. So also certain cities, because we started in Texas and we do have a bit of most of our client base, I would say, is based out of Texas. We have a lot more coverage there, and again, growing. But yeah, send us a city or a specific state that you like us to cover, and we most likely can. Can I jump into the pricing model?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. So two types of pricing. One of them is, like I said, you can subscribe to the entire state. That's $99 a month, and you get access to all the cities within that state. And again, if we have any new cities, that covers that. Or if you sign up for individual cities, that's 37 bucks a month, which I think is, once you get a deal, it pays for itself. Typically, depending on the type of customers that we get, right, it can average up to like 20 something days, depending on how active you are with your phones, right? If you're calling everyone and you have your solid marketing, etc., the quickest deal we've seen is within 24 hours. But on average, it could range from like 23 days to like 60, right? And that really depends on your skills or whatever VA team that you have, right? So to step back, $90 a month, and because you're watching this video, we have a coupon that you can enter, which if you enter Coffee Closers in any of the cities or states, you'll get a 2-week trial for free.
Ooh.
And yeah, so I think that gives you enough time to test out the platform, export, give us any feedback. And also, hopefully, within those 2 weeks, you can close a deal. And obviously, you can become one of our many testimonials. And if there's any questions, we can feel free to ask and do my best to answer them.
Perfect. Yeah. Ask any questions you may have on code violations, virtual dollars, as well. If you just have any questions in general in terms of real estate tech for Pablo or myself, feel free to enter it as well.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of it, obviously, different viewers, different interests, right? Some people are trying to learn prop tech, but if you are an investor, I would say this one's from the feedback that I'm getting, right? This has helped people to at least narrow the scope of what properties they want to focus on, because especially if your current strategy is driving for dollars, this is a no-brainer, right? I think one, you save on time, gas, and obviously, again, if that's your bread and butter, this makes it a lot easier, right? Or at least now you know what properties to drive directly to and verify our information, right? Which we're very, I can stand by it. So I think if you're using that type of strategy, great. If you're also one of those folks, because I get these questions a lot for, hey, do you have a water shutoff list? Like I said, those are no longer there, but a lot of those, like if I went back to Houston and I just enter, maybe I'll just type water shut off or just water. You can also get context out of that, right? So there's no running water, different types of issues, right? Water meter, etc. So sometimes it'll say, hey, my water shut off, etc. So you're kind of getting the same data as well, but in the different contexts. So that's if you, again, any questions, feel free to send them along.
I have a question for you. So as someone who's, security specialist moving into the data space. And I think we touched on a little bit about this in the podcast, but like, how is it for you when you start to learn about like natural language processing to parse these complaints, leveraging LLMs? Like, how was that learning process for you?
So I think version one was a lot of like where complain contains the word high grass, etc. Right? I think, and don't get me wrong. I think a lot of times we still do that for some of them that are smaller, but just because our data, we have a big data warehouse now. It slows down a lot of the querying, right? I don't want to get too technical, but I guess just in simpler terms, now we got into the point where we've had a small LLM that basically, if it's relevant to real estate, we give it a certain scoring and it ends up on the platform. Like I said, for some of those, we're still using, where it contains and doesn't contain this, right? So I would say from that point of view, if unless you're into data, you probably have better ways of approaching it. But I think as many business owners know, you kind of have to figure out ways that work for you. And yeah, it's kind of that's what it's been working
Yeah.
for.
I mean, sometimes an if else statement is all you need, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we have a good question here. So just to confirm, the software can it stack property distress issues like code violations, delinquent taxes, divorce, etc.
So we're trying to do that, like I said, because a lot of our user base is around Texas. So some of them that say tax delinquents, they are like, for example, in some like Atlanta. But as you can see, some of our data is limited. So I think right now, because we're trying to just focus primarily on the code of complaints, um, most all the cities that you're accessing will have just the general complaints, right? As we grow the platform, you'll see this tax delinquent one. So yes, you can list stack, but it doesn't apply to all cities. It will eventually will, but for the major ones, for a good portion of them, you do have that ability. For other ones, you don't. So, for example, for Harris County, Houston, we get eviction or debt claim. You're not going to see that everywhere, but we will focus primarily on, like, let's at least add tax delinquents to make it a little bit more relevant to those that may have a motivation, right? But yeah, so to answer your question, some cities you can, others you cannot. But
That's the joys of working in public records data, right? Every
exactly.
county
Yeah,
seems to like to have a little twist of how they do things differently.
exactly. Um, yeah, I think, and yeah, like I mentioned, I covered the cities in Florida. Yeah, any other questions, feel free to bring them up. And yeah, I
So
mean, go ahead.
yeah, you mentioned that lightly that for like your rental portfolio, you've had ups and downs maybe with tenants. Like where do you stand today in terms of how you want to grow your portfolio and maybe like any learning lessons that you've had from the past?
So I even put together like a free course on how to run a Airbnb in the past, and I think now, so part of me, right, very, I think we all think that we're being conscious, but also part of the Airbnb bit, depending on the city, right? Just because of what big companies like BlackRock, etc., like they just bought off the inventory for single family housing, right? Part of me kind of pulling back on a lot of those properties, like I also don't want to contribute to sort of the shortage of people wanting to buy their primary home, right? And at the same time, because you're an investor, right? I think what I've done now, is I'm trying to look for other opportunities abroad, right? Like I mentioned before, like London is quite expensive. So right now, I think just most of the kind of money that's going here, I'm trying to reinvest into a business, but eventually buying a flat here, right? There are opportunities here as well, because there's about 90,000 vacant properties in central London, right? I mean, that might become an opportunity in the future. As far as in the States, I think if we get into the fix and flips, more for short sales, I think that's what we want to do. And that's why I want to look into the sort of the leads for contractors as we're building better relationships and maybe we can go, half and half and whatnot. But yeah, just general. If you're managing properties, either get a good property management company, or make sure that you're, within driving range, within, where you can, if somebody calls you because they have issues, you can go and address it, right? One of the properties that I have, my father sort of lives 5 minutes away from that, so it makes it easier to address anything that comes, right. And I'll take care of my dad, so he's more than happy to do that.
Always great to have family close by to a property. Always helps. But I actually didn't know that there were so many vacancies in central London. Could you explain like why that is maybe?
So sure. So part of it is because, I mean, in a way, London is a big tax haven, right? So after the USSR collapse, a lot of, um, you know laws, right? If you had an investment of 1 million, you can get permanent residency, right? So I guess fast forward now, where I'm getting at is a lot of the properties that are vacant are owned either by, Eastern European sort of oligarchs, or, really wealthy Arabs, or really wealthy, Chinese. So, but the thing is, or anyone else in general, but what happens is that they register them under shell companies that are registered based out of like the Cayman Islands, Virgin Islands, etc. Places that are still part of the Commonwealth, but that they have also, good tax sort of exemptions, right? So there's a lot of properties, but when you get into the who owns them, you end up hitting shell companies, and after that, it's a big question mark, right? So I'm still, positive of, there's ways to find those, and I'm still, when I figure it out, I'll let you know.
Yeah, definitely do. Is there like an open corporates version for companies or like LLCs over there?
There is, but again, I think the part, no, but you can't get past the shell name. It's like,
Ah, okay.
yeah, like, so having like an LLC and not knowing, you know, and I think again, it's by design.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it's anonymous. Makes sense.
But for the general, like if you're just trying to find a property for someone else, you can pay a small fee, and you can identify, if it's an individual owner, you can definitely, I think it's probably the equivalent of like $4, and you can see who owns the deed, and it discloses the name.
Got it. Makes sense. So when you were looking, transitioning back to the US data,
Mhm.
was there like a particular city where you're like, oh man, like the county records are just like more of a mess than I've seen before?
Uh, so there are smaller counties in Texas, right, where sometimes you have to either get on the phone or email them, because they don't make them publicly available. So I think it's not necessarily that well, a few instances. So two things. One is around the San Antonio area outside. They make it very difficult. So you have to request it. Then it takes a few weeks to get, an FTP login, which the password is not going to be permanent. So you should, might as well get the parse information at that point in time, and you have to kind of repeat the process. So that's a bit of a pain point. The other bits are that I think whatever software they're using, the database, I think they're using like a Unix-based database. So the data is exported in a tab, not necessarily a tab format, but in a sort of, anyways, it's not like, I guess, for the common, general terms, it's not like they provide to you in a nice formatted CSV or, Excel format. No, they just give you like a blob of text, and you have to make sense of it. And that's taken us, a few days to figure it out, and we kind of done it now. We gotten better at it, but I could see why people would give up, a lot of times, because it's not very friendly.
Wow. It's just so interesting. I find that like how it's not even like by state, but literally by county, how they deliver like the data, like if you need to download it and work with it, could just be so different amongst them.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of times it's just regardless of, what kind of data you're looking for. I always say, my rationale is that, if the big players are doing it, like the data exists. So I'm just trying to figure out where, right? And I think I mentioned in some of my sort of other lives is that there is such thing as open data. So if you enter like Houston open data, Dallas open data, Orlando open data, there is a lot of data sets that you could probably make sense of. I'll give you an example. Like for Dallas, even the police reports, there's a lot of, you know, not necessarily gruesome information, but probably things that you probably don't want to see. But there's break-ins in which the property is reported as vacant property. So you can get a lot of context whether you're looking for the crime data type of, context, or if you're just looking for empty properties as well. So, anyways, there's a lot of use cases that you can kind of
Yeah,
develop.
definitely. And I don't know if you have the availability to, but I know you showed me a prototype of, say, someone who is looking out of state and they want to understand like the makeup of the neighborhood more, of like what violations are occurring. So they're not looking to get a deal, but they're more looking to get context.
Of how the property looks like. Yeah.
How like what violations have, I think it was like a map you showed me, and it might have been color coded based off of like how many violations or which ones were existing.
Yeah, if you give me 1 minute, I can pull it up. I just,
Yeah,
but
take
yeah,
your
I was gonna say, yeah, that's a good one. And honestly, again, if the data exists and you're, whether you're techie or not, um, there is a there is a lot of opportunities in my opinion. Let me pull it up here. I'm gonna
awesome.
share window. Let's look at here. So here's an example, right? So if you're, if you're interested in a particular property, right? Let's say, I don't know, those are Houston. I think they are Houston. Let's see if I get an error. My apologies, because it's just proof of concept. But yeah, the intent here is that in the future you enter a address that you're interested in investing, right? Maybe you're in Florida and you're trying to invest in properties in Georgia, right? Well, you may not live there, and you're running the numbers through Coffee Closers or any other platform, and that's a really good deal. Cash flow is there, etc. But now you're trying to identify how does the neighborhood actually look like, right? Well, this gives you a decent idea of what kind of issues are being reported. So, for example, here from experience, that nuisance of property is probably not a great, you know, deal. And what I mean by that is that sometimes, for example, this property is in 77051, right? Uh, I know Houston pretty well, so this maybe not be considered a great area in general. But again, because properties are probably cheaper there, it's probably where you're going to find yourself looking at, right? Now, if so basically we're contextualizing, what kind of complaints are happening around the area, how does the area look like, and I guess based on this nuisance on property, and again, people are probably dumping animals. Unfortunately, there's a few things around that area, right, that are happening. If you wanted to get more granular, right, that's where kind of the virtual driving for dollars kind of kicks in which we can probably look at the specifics, right, the actual description of the complaints. So, anyways, I guess it's a proof of concept, but I think it does serve to give you a general boots on the ground of how those neighborhoods looks like, especially if you're investing in your primary residence. Like, you may not want to live there, or maybe you do. Yeah. So
This would have been so helpful for my first house hack because I visited during the daytime, all good. And then I move in, and then there's just one guy who he would sit out with like a big speaker. And at 10 a.m., like on Tuesdays, he would just blast music. Like, well, I can't do any recordings at this time. And then also there was this garage that they would have like the loudest cars, like people without their mufflers, just like room through the street. So this is like really useful context, not only for like gathering an investment property, but also like you said, personal residence too.
I think there is an inverse of this as well. And the other bit is we can also we started looking into permits. So I guess an idea for you and other prop tech folks is like you can also do this, but to looking for permits for new development. So that way, same use case, enter an address that you're interested in investing. But in this case, it'll show you growth. So if you know that they're developing new neighborhoods or new apartment complexes, etc., then you probably know that there is investment being poured in that area. So from the point of view of this is going to appraise, right? Maybe I'll buy something and hold it for the next 5 years as there's more people. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can look at, even from what businesses are moving there, et cetera, right? So if you get a Black Swan, if you get Starbucks or et cetera, there's probably growth and revitalization or gentrification, whichever one you want to call it. But yeah, I think those are good data points of kind of giving you an idea of the neighborhood, right? Without relying, like you said, on outdated FBI data of crime maps and yeah.
Love it. Yeah, and I love the proof of concept and how you just thought of an idea, see if you could stitch the data together. Don't make it look pretty, but just put it up somewhere. What were you using as your backend? Was it like your tech stack for that prototype?
For this one, I think it's it's Python, Web Flask, Python Flask. Yep.
You ever use Streamlit?
No.
Streamlit, oh my God, makes things just so much easier just to spin up a quick web app. Let me show you quickly, actually, because it could be useful for other folks on here as well. Yeah, because I used to struggle where I would do a lot of my prototypes in notebooks, and then I tried, doing Flask and all that. I'm like, this is so much setup just to throw something up and share it with someone. So Streamlit, yeah, super easy. It's free, open source. So you can quickly write easily different components, connect your data, have charts in place, and it's already you can host your proof of concept really easily and share it out. So it's really, really awesome.
Maybe next time that you're guest, I can move the other ones, the permit one as well. I think it's I mean, at the end of the day, right? I think you touched on this before. It's when you're looking at data, I think it's more of the narrative that you can tell. So if you can give me specific things, especially for non-techie folks, right? If you tell me specific, a narrative of the condition of the neighborhood, etc., that comes across a lot better than just showing you numbers.
100%. And on that topic of folks who are, say, less technical, and they maybe have an idea, want to develop a quick solution, have you used at all ChatGPT in terms of coding and helping with the baseline of projects?
That's all I use. So I think I mentioned before, I set with this idea for the subscription-based services for over 2 years. And it wasn't until ChatGPT came across that I've been now any idea that I have, right? A combination of ChatGPT and obviously your use cases. I mean, it helps out. I'll just, again, be wary of not, putting in passwords or any sensitive things because people get too comfortable with that. And again, just keep that in mind. But yeah, 100%.
100%. Yeah, I actually have an example here I could share quickly. It's a little sneak peek into some of next week's topic. Where is it? I have, of course, so many tabs open. Always. All right, here it is. So let me share my screen. Yeah, I would love to get any viewers here, their opinions on this, as well as you, Pablo. So time and time again, I get questions, how do I scrape county data? Which for most people who are non-technical, I mean, some of the best solutions is using something like Browse AI, but decided, all right, I'll create a video of how to do web scraping on, say, pre-foreclosures. So I didn't want to spend all this time inspecting the elements and make this our project into something that took several days. So what I did was I took the county website. So this is Hillsborough County, Florida. I have here pre-foreclosures, so pre-auction for November. And if you go into any of these dates, you could see all of the records. So this is an example of a property that's going into auction November 19th. And here's a property address as well as some information. So if you wanted to try to maybe do a subject to deal or some sort of other financing opportunity to acquire this investment property at a discount before it goes to auction, you could do so. So ultimately, you want to get this into a spreadsheet that then you could reach out to folks. So back to my problem. I want to do this quick video, proof of concept. I don't want to spend days on this, just an hour max. So I copied the elements from the web page, just put into an HTML file, and then in red, I just circled like all the data points that I want. So I gave it a prompt, and then within seconds, builds me an initial set of code. Like this isn't the final code, of course, but an initial set of how to scrape this single web page, how to get the data into a structured format, and then ultimately how to get it into a CSV file. So I absolutely love being able to use LLMs to at least like kickstart your process of solving a problem and generating some code.
Yeah, it's a good trial and error all the time. I have this friend that always, I think in a mocking way, he's like, ChatGPT, right? He's like, yeah, I leverage ChatGPT, but I don't think you could replicate the same work. So a lot of it is like just make sure that you know what your end goal is. Obviously, like you said, it gets you started, but obviously there's a lot of trial and error. So yeah, I mean, don't take away your own sort of talent and creativity of developing those, because yeah, it does require that.
Exactly. Yeah, I see it like an intern. So you need to give it specific instructions and it can, get part of the way there, but there is a level of expertise that's still needed to bring the project to life.
There's is an interesting thing. It may not be relevant, may be relevant, but something called OpenAI. I think there's a open source project called Swarm. So basically, you can create agents that interact with each other. So if you have, let's say, a quote unquote acquisition manager, the code caller, etc. Yeah. So, anyways, you can develop like a sales team that, to your point, you have a senior salesperson and you have these other folks that just focus on researching, and they can interact with each other. So you can just kind of, deal with the senior person, and it will ask the other ones to do research, and they'll come back to you. It's quite interesting. It's OpenAI Swarm, but it's just
Oh,
interesting.
that's a good tidbit. I'll have to look into it.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, I agree. So for me, full transparency, OpenAI obviously costs money, right? My LLMs that I run for my business is just open source projects from Hugging Face, which you can just host those as a self, uh, you know, locally. So even my costs are free because I run my own hardware. But yeah, I mean, you're right. They went away from their mission. So, but that's a different conversation.
I'll just share briefly here, Hugging Face.
And thanks for the mansplaining, SW.
Yeah, we appreciate that. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here once again for what's also coming next week. And while I do that, Pablo, how would folks be able to reach out to you as well as to check out the software?
I think for now, just the virtual drive for dollars is a good area that we have a contact information there, or lspdata.io. And yeah, we can either jump on a Zoom call as an introduction kind of call. And that's the current best approach, as we're quite busy with other projects.
Awesome. Yes, I will have the contact information as well posted with the YouTube video. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, Pablo. This has been an amazing session, really diving into code violations, learning a lot, as well as even giving us that tech overview too. So coming next week, we're going to keep on the very tech heavy focus, and we're going to have Noah from Bright Data to talk about web scraping, data collection, and how if you have any projects you're looking to implement, how you could possibly utilize their services to be able to accomplish them.
Very good.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Pablo, and looking forward to following your journey.
Likewise, yeah. No, loving what you're doing. So yeah, long time fan here. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks